Russia and China plan Eurasian dominance. This is China's new foreign policy prerogative, introduced by Xi Jinping earlier this year. It speaks of being proactive, determined, unified, and striving for achievement. While daring to fight, now compare the text to Deng Xiaoping's policy, which has reigned supreme until now. It emphasizes being calm, hiding capacities, biding for time, keeping a low profile, and never claiming leadership. The two viewpoints could not be more different, and her new way of doing business signals a departure from low-profile policy. Putin, meanwhile, is making waves in his own right. Shortly after Xi's new policy, Russia signed off on a $165 billion deal with China, which prescribes the development of at least 80 bilateral projects across Eurasia. As a result, new pipelines, terminals, and trade corridors are in the making, gluing China and Russia to one another and extending their hegemony over the periphery. The interesting thing is that for the longest time, a Chinese-Russian alliance was believed to be carrying too much baggage, too much history, and too many principles to succeed. But geopolitics is ever-changing, and when someone says you can't put a price on principles, well then maybe the offer was just too low. Foreign politicians play the cards they're dealt. In April 1997, a preceding meeting took place at the Kremlin. Boris Yeltsin hosted Jiang Zemin, and both jointly declared commitment to a multipolar world without hegemony, denouncing the monopolization of world affairs, presumably by the United States. But at the height of the unipolar moment, there was little either could do about it other than stay out of each other's way for interior development and Central Asian expansion. China pursued a development strategy centered on export-oriented manufacturing, concentrated in its coastal special economic zones. Russia, in the meantime, leveraged hydrocarbon wealth to complement Western industry, running a dozen natural gas pipelines into Europe. By 2011, the Russian-German Extreme project was brought online. 1 decade later, Europe was purchasing roughly half its gas from Russia, accounting for 2/5 of Moscow's state revenue. Yet this strategy of energy interdependence contradicted Moscow's terrestrial objectives. NATO and EU encroachment on its frontiers generated tensions, especially over Ukraine. And in 2014, the overthrow of a pro-Russian government in Kiev prompted Moscow to annex Crimea and stoke a separatist conflict in Donbas. Biden did not fall asleep at the wheel. He slapped sanctions on projects like Nord Stream 2, even threatening to end them entirely. In this, Biden found common cause with his East European counterparts who feared geopolitical marginalization. Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine saw sanctions intensify, causing a temporary €67 billion deficit in EU-Russian trade, but after Nord Stream was sabotaged. In September 2022, Russian gas delivery fell off a cliff, and with nothing left to glue Russia to Europe, the former started replacing its westward industries with physical infrastructures going towards China. Now Moscow and Beijing are aiming for $200 billion in annual trade by 2024. Here, the first port of call is agriculture. Proposed in 2012, the new land grain corridor will connect Russian grain to Chinese markets, dodging the Black Sea route and reducing China's dependence on North America. And Australian imports. The project's capital investments total $6.5 billion and will shift 7 million tons of grain annually from the Russian Far East, the Ural region, and the Siberian federal districts. The bulk of this will cross the grain terminals by Kalsk, a railway shipment facility bordering Inner Mongolia that began construction in 2020. In return, Beijing is expanding its vehicle exports to Russia and collaborating on aircraft and science projects. The taproot of integration, however, is energy policy. China's demand is set to absorb Russian supply. Spearheading the operation is the Power of Siberia pipeline, overseen by Gazprom and the China National Petroleum Corporation. Power of Siberia runs along the Chinese coast via Beijing to Shanghai. Gas delivery began in 2019, increasing by half throughout 2022. A southern expansion will begin delivery in 2025. Meanwhile, the Power of Siberia 2, connecting the Yamal Peninsula gas fields via Mongolia to China, will begin construction in 2024. This pipeline will provide an outlet for gas fields previously serving Europe, making it a direct replacement for the Nord Stream. If all goes to plan, by 2030, Russian gas exports to China will hit 98 billion cubic meters, along with 100 million tons of LNG. Besides energy surging, bilateral trade has also accelerated the dollarization. Cross-border transactions are increasingly settled in yuan by late 2022. Yuan ruble trade eclipsed dollar transactions on some days, and Moscow's turn to friendly currencies has seen the yuan's share of trade leap from 1 to 45% on Russian currency markets, while dollar trade halved from 80 to 40%, apart from softening Western sanctions. This has bolstered Xinjiang as a cross-border settlement and financial center. The partnership has also chartered taboos regarding China's footprint in former Soviet territories, Beijing's year-on-year. Central Asian exports increased by more than half in March 2023, with a bulk related to investment in energy, minerals, and rail transport. These investments include a new railway from Kashgar to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, supplementing the Middle Corridor planned since 1997. Russia only endorsed a project in 2022, and it is due for completion in 2024. Consolidating these gains, she unveiled a regional development plan during a meeting with the 5 Central Asian presidents. Beijing's Central Asia policy will focus on trade, investment, tourism, and cultural exchange. Moreover, the blueprint is linked with security cooperation, hedging against residual Turkic anxieties concerning China's controversial practices. In Xinjiang still, more Chinese lawmakers are looking to fast-track Line D of the China Central Asia Pipeline, a project that turned Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan into some of China's largest gas suppliers. For context, in 2022, the combined value of Chinese-bound Kazakh and Turkmen trade surpassed $100 billion taken together. Central Asia is a lucrative market, and China is planning to make an impression. But as the rubber meets the road, China and Russia have also begun backing each other's regional ambitions. Whereas before, the Russians would ignore America's Asia-Pacific alliances, and the Chinese would brush off American policymaking. In Europe now, Moscow and Beijing have developed more sympathy and understanding towards one another, taking the AUKUS alliance. As an example, the $370 billion program to arm Australia with nuclear-powered submarines is ostensibly aimed at China. Yet Moscow opposes the pact as part of Western efforts to encircle Eurasia via interlocking groupings like NATO stanzas, Five Eyes, and Quad. To this end, China and Russia have responded with their alphabet superarrangements including BRICS, the RCEP, and CSO. Another example of shared regional ambition is Beijing piggybacking its Arctic ambitions onto Russia, which boasts substantial ports and other assets in the Arctic Circle by 2050. The North Pole is predicted to be ice-free, which raises questions about seabed resources including oil, gas, and uranium. For China, this also means new maritime routes potentially halting shipping times. But be that as it may, there are still flies in the ointment. Though geopolitics is tying Russia and China together, there have been minimal soft power inroads. China's cultural and media influence in Russia remains low-key, although Russian coverage of China is generally favorable. The lack of real influence means warm relations could quickly chill. Should the bilateral relationship degrade, such tensions could emerge over Chinese inroads into Central Asia, or its increasing influence over Vladivostok. A new bilateral deal effected from June 2023 seeks to promote development in the Chilean province by allowing goods bound for Chuajiang to pass through Vladivostok terror. But Chinese nationalists have long craved the city, which was annexed by the Russians by an unequal treaty in 1858, and showed the region's demographic and economic skills tipped further towards China. This could stoke Russian anxieties about irredentism, but for the moment each side is content to burn that bridge when they come to it. And in the grand scheme of things, Russia's European aspirations are dead. But its Asian aspirations have been given new life. Its partnership of convenience with China is evolving into one of necessity. And like all healthy marriages, it has been enabled by strategic concessions in Central Asia and the Far East, though some may write Russia as China's junior partner. Its massive size, resource wealth, and nuclear arsenal will allow it to retain much of its political autonomy, not all, but enough. And that is a bargain Russia is willing to make because since politics is the world's second oldest profession, it closely resembles the first from the Caspian Report. If you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, now is a good time to do so. Just remember to click the bell icon to receive notifications in any case. Thank you for your time, and Sol Foreign.